Hi, I'm Rosie.
And I'm May. So Bradford Pride 2020 happened during lockdown. All the events and activities that were planned had to go online, and the question was, how could we march and feel connected and part of the community even though we weren't meant to be leaving our homes? So Rosie and I got our heads together and we had the idea of doing a remote march. So we created an audio piece which was an hour long, which was the amount of allotted exercise that you were allowed to do at that time because of COVID. So we made this hour-long show, and then we got in touch with BCB, who are a community broadcasting radio company, and they aired it at the time that the march would have happened on Saturday, and we invited people to listen in. So headphones in and do a local walk around where they were, or listen in their homes if that was appropriate. The
tagline was March for Bradford Pride, physically distant, always united. So after we had the idea, we kind of went on a bit of a journey, because I guess if we were marching in real life, we'd have marched through the streets and then we would have gathered at City Park and had some speeches and then had a party. But we had this sort of hour-long piece of content, this platform. And so actually the process that we went on was a lot of learning for us as well. So we learned about sort of the birth of the contemporary Pride March, about what happened in New York in 1969 at the Stonewall Inn, and how that kind of resistance and on the street resistance gave birth to what can often these days be kind of very commercial sort of parades. And so we kind of really dug into some of the politics and kind of commercialisation, decommercialisation sort of debates around that. And we interviewed quite a few people on the show as well, because we wanted it not just to be us. So we spoke to people about those topics, but also about kind of contemporary issues, I guess, for the queer community in West Yorkshire and beyond, under lockdown, but also in normal times. So that was kind of really interesting for us, and we took some music requests from our interviewees, and I guess we felt like we really learnt a lot, and we kind of pulled in other bits of our practices. So May has a dancing background and kind of participatory arts, as do I, and kind of the live art element to the audio piece was really important to us. So we kind of build it as part guided walk, part mass choreography, and I think for us the sense that we would be connected in real time, and yet because we were physically moving together, that felt like a really beautiful metaphor for kind of progressing the queer movement, I guess.
And there were some moments of really grounding in the now. So we would invite people who were listening to stop and maybe direct them to look at a certain thing, or send a photo in of their walk. And that was actually something added, special, that wouldn't have happened had we just been kind of skipping through the street. It was quite an intimate feeling, I think, that people got.
That was one of the key differences, actually, was that although we missed out in terms of that sense of being in a big crowd all together and very visible, what we missed out there, we gained in terms of intimacy. There was this kind of slightly kind of like a mindful tone to some of the stuff that we created. It felt a bit more reflective and quiet. A lot of people we know went to Heaton Woods to do their march, for example. And so there was something where it felt like there was kind of space to unpack some discussions, which we would probably not have been able to do if we were marching sort of normally.
So one of the things that I think was really interesting that came out of it was the fact that we were able to have a bit of distance from what we have got used to doing each year. So going to the Pride, and joining in, we were able to have a bit of distance from that and almost reflect on what the marches are like, how it works, what we remember, what's important, and maybe during COVID-19, like, some people have had more time to think in general about life and what bits you do want to return to and what doesn't work so much for you. So we were able to be quite analytical, which I think was really interesting, and I just felt really proud of the Bradford voices that we had on there, and people that had experienced going to Pride in Mumbai or going to their first Pride as a young trans man in Leeds, and it was like a moment out in a way. Which I think was a really nice aspect to it. The other thing that was really interesting is talking about the intersectionality of why people march, and in the LGBT community there are lots of different stories, but there's also lots of other parts of society and people that experience oppression as well. And one of our friends was talking about early marches being very mixed in terms of like class and race and sexuality, and those kind of groups having a solidarity all in a fight for equality, and I think with the Black Lives Matter protests which are happening at the moment, it just really makes us think of how we do show solidarity. We turned up in person to a Black Lives Matter protest in Bradford, which just felt like being in person was so important. And I think one of the things about protesting is a feeling. So ours was a bit different to that, but in a way it just was a bit thoughtful maybe, and a bit quieter and more reflective. Yeah.
So I think one of the things that I've felt during the sort of COVID-19 lockdown is that although we have more restrictions on our everyday lives and fewer choices, actually it's enabled me to be more creative more creative full stop. So creating this March of May was one of them, but was one example. But I think generally parameters can really be useful for creativity, and if it wasn't for this kind of barrier of not being able to physically all meet up and march together, then we wouldn't have come up with something like this, and we wouldn't have explored kind of marching and history and the politics around it. We really wouldn't have gone there as much or kind of connected with that community. And actually there's an accessibility thing as well, because our friends in Glasgow and Brighton and London, they were all able to join the march and march with us at the same time. We actually advertised it, said that it was worldwide, so I don't know how many people joined in Bangladesh, but hopefully quite a lot. But yeah, we heard that there were over 800 people were listening to BCB at that time, so we were really pleased with the listener figures. And we had a really nice response as well, I think, because people had really felt like quite disconnected from their friends and community because of the lockdown. We really got a strong sense of how much it meant to people. Lots of people got in touch with us and sent us WhatsApp messages and Facebook posts, and people shared photos of their march, and that felt really special. I think it's so nice to kind of hear back from people, because in some ways, it's quite an isolated experience. But and a lot of people, actually a lot of straight friends said that, I really learned something. So I think in some ways it kind of gave people some more understanding and some more words to talk about queer equality in a more confidently. And a lot of our queer community just said they felt really connected to us, and at a time when people might be locked down with people who don't necessarily understand or accept their sexuality or their gender, then it felt like an important thing to do, a different way of marching.